Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, hosted by the American Academy of Pediatrics and HealthyChildren.org. Today we are discussing solutions for safe and sound sleep. But a few pieces of housekeeping before we begin. The webinar is being recorded, so if you lose connectivity for any reason, you will be able to watch and listen to the archived webinar in about a week or two. If we can help you with any technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat function and send us a message. And don't forget that we will have time at the end of the webinar for a question and answer session. To ask a question, just use the chat function. You can find the chat by clicking on the little speech bubble at the bottom of your screen or the person-shaped icon if you're using a mobile device. You can send in your questions at any time, and Dr. Hsu will get to as many as she can at the end of our presentation. And now I'd like to introduce our host, Dr. Jennifer Hsu. Dr. Hsu is a practicing pediatrician, an author, and a mom from Atlanta. She is the co-author of Heading Home with Your Newborn and Food Bites. She's a frequent guest on national and local television, radio, and web-based programs, and she is the medical editor of HealthyChildren.org. She has also served as the Living Well Health expert on CNN.com, has contributed medical information to Baby Center and WebMD, and serves on the Parents Magazine Advisory Board. Welcome, Dr. Hsu.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about sleep. But before we can talk about sleep, I wanted to touch on why sleep is important. So not getting enough sleep, as you can see here, can lead to things such as behavior problems. It can lead to crankiness and trouble paying attention, but it can also affect your child's overall health. In fact, poor sleep can be associated with high blood pressure, weight problems and obesity, headaches, and depression. And that's even true for adults. So it's important for us to think about sleep as well as for that of our children. Children who get enough sleep, on the other hand, tend to have healthier immune systems and better school performance, behavior, memory, and mental health. So how much sleep do kids actually need? And this is a great graphic. I love it because it can show the progression, counting down a little bit from babies who sleep pretty much all the time, they eat and sleep, to teenagers who maybe need just 8 to 10 hours a day, which is similar to adults. So you can see that as we get older, we need a little bit less and less sleep. And these are science-based, reasonable guidelines that can help our kids learn, grow, and play. So 4 to 12 months, that's past the newborn period. So newborns maybe sleep 20 hours a day. 4 to 12 months, you can see here 12 to 16, and then so on. Do keep in mind that this reflects the total number of sleep hours in a 24-hour period. So if your child still naps, be sure to take that into account when you add up how many hours of sleep they're getting per day. So you can see here that teens still do need a lot of sleep, but we know that their natural sleep-wake cycles do shift, sometimes as many as 2 hours later than other people, so younger children and adults. So a teenager who's used to getting up maybe at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. might feel better staying in bed till closer to 9 or 10. And this happens around the start of puberty, where they wake up later but also want to stay up later. Even though it can be tempting to try to get by with less sleep for yourself or your kids, it's really important to make sleep a priority for the entire family and try to avoid skipping hours here and there, such as staying up too late and sleeping in too much on weekends. So if you can stay within a range of maybe an hour or so in either direction, even on weekends, that can be really helpful. Some parents ask me if there is a problem if a child gets too much sleep. And usually that's not a problem at all. It's actually a good thing. But in rare cases, they can mean medical conditions such as having a problem with your thyroid, or especially in teenagers, there might be an infection such as mononucleosis or mono. In newborns, too much sleep can also lead to poor weight gain. So if you have any concerns that there might be a medical issue for your child sleeping too much or not sleeping enough, definitely talk to your pediatrician about these situations. And this is just a reminder of why sleep is so important. And this is why we're talking about it today. One word about safe sleep and infants being children under the age of 1 year. It's really important to try to prevent tragedies such as sudden infant death syndrome from happening. So you might have heard some people saying that there's nothing better than a sleeping baby or nothing more beautiful than a sleeping baby. And while I do agree that's a great thing, I think there's nothing more beautiful than a baby who is sleeping safely. The added benefit to knowing that your baby is sleeping as safe as possible is that you can also sleep more soundly. And the reason why it's important to talk about this is that we know that more than 3,500 babies die suddenly and unexpectedly every year while sleeping in the United States. And this can be due to sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS, as well as accidental deaths from either suffocation or strangulation. So when babies sleep on pillows, blankets, or soft surfaces, they're at a greater risk for sudden infant death syndrome. And when they're in a bed with you as an adult, there's an added risk of suffocation from soft bedding or getting trapped or rolled over. The good news is that there are some easy strategies that you can follow to keep your baby's sleep space safe. So the first thing is to put babies to bed on their back. And this is the safest way to sleep when they're too young to turn themselves over. The recommendation is to put them on their backs to sleep for the first year of life. Once they're old enough to roll over on their own, though, and this often happens around 4 months or a little bit older, if they're rolling around front to back to front in the middle of the night, then you don't need to flip them back over. But it is a good idea to start them on their backs at the beginning of each night. It's also important to keep the sleep surface clutter-free. So if you can see on this picture that this is a completely bare crib except for the baby, and you want to skip pillows, bumpers, blankets, and toys in this age group. That's under age 1. It's also important to use a firm and flat mattress with a tightly fitted sheet, also seen in this picture, and put babies to sleep in their own space. By following these techniques, you can keep your baby safe and reduce the risk of SIDS, as well as the chances of you or your partner mistakenly rolling over your baby. These practices can also help you sleep more soundly, since we all sleep more deeply when we know our babies are as safe as can be. So remember to set good habits. I know as parents we want to snuggle with our babies as much as possible when they're small, but we also want to avoid the habit of having them sleep in our beds forever and ever. So getting your baby used to sleeping in her own space now can set good habits for later. Here's some do's and don'ts for babies and sleep. As a reminder, until their first birthday, put babies to sleep on their backs for all sleep times, and that includes naps and at night. Remember, this is flat on the back and not on the side. And the problem with putting them on the side, in the side position, is that sometimes a baby can roll over more easily onto their stomach. And if they don't know how to roll yet, or if they're swaddled, they may have a hard time lifting their heads and rolling back over. Some parents worry that a baby might choke when on their backs, but the way a baby's anatomy and airway are and the effective gag reflex, these things will keep them from choking while sleeping on their backs. And even for babies with reflux or GERD, gastroesophageal reflux, the recommendation is to sleep on their backs on a flat surface. There was a time when people recommended having babies sleep at an angle, meaning elevating the head portion of a crib or bassinet, but we now know that that's probably not safe because babies can become, they can roll down so that their feet are all the way at the bottom of the crib or bassinet, or sometimes they can they can get turned around so that their heads are facing downwards instead of being propped up. So the safest position is completely flat in the crib or bassinet. And it's important to avoid the use of sleep positioners, inclined sleepers or wedges, and any special mattresses or sleep surfaces or product that says that they can prevent SIDS. And the reason for that is there are no products on the market that have been proven to prevent SIDS. So keep that in mind, that marketing messages are not the same as proven claims of safety. And in fact, some of these products can be potentially dangerous to babies while they're sleeping. So things like even like infant chairs or swings are not recommended for usual sleep. So longer, than several minutes at a time. So back to sleep on a bassinet or crib is best. Avoid putting your baby to sleep on a couch, sofa, or armchair the first time that they roll to be off of that piece of furniture. And remember the ABCs of sleep: alone, on their backs, and in a bare crib. A few words about the toddler age group. Routine is really important for toddlers, and the good news is that the SIDS risk decreases in this age group. There are some challenges of toddlers specifically as they learn to self-soothe and fall asleep on their own. So here are some sleep solutions. One thing is to set up a quiet and consistent bedtime routine to help your child understand that it will soon be time to go to bed. Somebody asked, what is toddler age? And that would be from 1 year old till about 2 to 3 years old. Okay, so roughly 1 to 2-ish. You can use this time to take a soothing bath, read a story together, listen to quiet music, or enjoy any other quiet activity. Sometimes it's tempting for parents to want to play with their child before bed, and I used to see this a lot when parents were working outside of the home, more so than during the pandemic, just for the simple fact that they weren't seeing their kids much, and so they wanted to play as soon as parents got home from work. But that's the time where the kids are really trying to wind down, and any type of active play at that time may make the child too excited to go to sleep. So if you find that your schedule makes it so it's hard for you to hang out and play with your child in the evening, then maybe see if everyone can wake up early for that special family time in the morning. At this age, you can also allow your child to take a favorite thing to bed each night. So after the first year, something like a teddy bear, a special blanket, or other favorite toy can help some children fall asleep, especially if they wake up during the night, and they might look for that comfort object. It's important to make sure that object is safe, though, so avoid any ribbons, buttons, or other parts that could become loose or choking hazards. And sometimes the stuffing or the pellets that are inside toys can also be dangerous, so make sure that the stuffed animals or toys are securely filled. You don't want to fill up your child's bed with too many toys, though, at this age group, because sometimes it can make your kids want to play rather than go to sleep. You'll also want to make your child comfortable at night and decide ahead of time what things they are allowed to have, such as one final sip of water, having a nightlight left on, or leaving the door slightly open. And set these rules and handle these bedtime needs ahead of time before lights go out, so that your child doesn't make excuses to procrastinate to avoid going to sleep, such as just one more sip of water, which many of us parents have heard many, many times. And finally, avoid the temptation to let your child sleep in the same bed with you. It can really make it harder for him to learn to fall asleep when he's alone. I do get questions a lot about sleep training. So even if, despite your best efforts, toddler sleep issues are a problem in your household, then there are many types of methods that you could try. There are common strategies with a lot of these sleep training methods. These include try to avoid returning to your child's room every time they complain or call out, And when you do go, try to wait several seconds before you answer and make your response time longer and longer each time they call out. And that's because the longer you wait, as long as they're not getting frantic or hysterical, the chances are better that they actually might fall asleep during one of those gaps. It's important to reassure your child that you are there. So you can either talk back to them through the door or the hallway. But if you do need to go into the room, make sure you don't turn on the light or play with them or stay, because that can make them a little bit more active and alert and want to play longer. You can do a method called like a gradual extraction from the room and move farther and farther from your child's bed every time you do go in. So you might start out by holding them or hugging them or patting them, and then eventually as you go in, you'll be farther and farther back away from their crib so that you can do this from the doorway and just say, it's time to go back to sleep. And that's even true for 4- and 5-year-olds who are calling out. The rule should be that they should stay in their bed. They can call out to you and you'll come and see, but the expectation is to stay in their bed to go to sleep. And so remind them every time they call out that it is time to go to sleep. Do give it time, though, because it can take a few days to several weeks to build these good habits. And while it is normal to get upset if a child's keeping you awake at night, do try to be calm and understanding, because if you're losing your cool in the middle of the night, that can make a child's sleep problems worse and make it harder for everybody else to go to sleep too. And I see some great questions coming in, so just keep those up and we will answer them towards the end, and I'll try to group them in themes and we'll try to get to them all. But I'm really glad people are listening and engaged, so thank you for that. Do know that up to 15 to 20% of children and adolescents have trouble falling asleep and staying asleep. So if your child is one of them, you're not alone. I'm willing to bet that at some point in a child's life that's a much higher percentage of kids who have trouble, but more on a regular basis at any given time, probably about 15 to 25%. A key ingredient to sleep solutions, as we mentioned, is to have a routine. I do know that this can be the hardest thing to do, especially in times when our regular routines are up in the air. But do remember that kids thrive on routines, and that goes for bedtime as well as nap times. So try to stick to them as much as possible. So what are some good bedtime routines? So for younger kids, maybe under 1 or 1 to 2 years old, the 3 B's of bedtime are a good way to structure a child's nighttime routine. As an added bonus, this is easy to remember. So you brush teeth, read a book together, and then it's time for bed. On bath days, you can add a 4th B, so that would be bath, brush, book, and bed. And I like this routine because nowhere in it does it say screen time or TV or a tablet to help soothe the child to sleep. And we will talk a little bit later about the effects screens have on sleep in a few minutes. In addition to the beat of bedtime, here are some more sleep solutions to keep in mind. Make sure your child is active during the day. It's better to do this a little bit earlier than later, such as not in the hour before bedtime, because too much physical activity late in the day can make it harder to wind down. So quieter activities later in the day would be good, such as yoga or other, slow meditative exercise. But earlier in the activity, have them playing, have them exercising, get fresh air. The recommendation is for kids to get at least 60 minutes of exercise a day on most days of the week. It doesn't all have to be done at once, so try to schedule that into your schedules. Do avoid time for winding down and allow your child to relax from the day's activities. And one way to do that is to avoid overscheduling, especially before the pandemic. I did see a lot of kids with sleep problems because right after school they had some sports, they had music lessons, they had scouts, tutoring, so many things like that, especially older children, that it meant that it was later before they could go do homework. and that kept them awake much, much later. So an overpacked schedule can make it challenging for kids and adults to get enough sleep. So if you're finding that that's an issue for you, try to make sure not to overschedule yourself either. We talked a little bit about screen time. The AAP does recommend keeping all screens, that's TVs, computers, laptops, tablets, and phones, out of children's bedrooms, especially at night. So one way to help with that is to have a charging area, such as in the kitchen, that keeps all the screens out. And really try to avoid screens that might make a kid more upset or more active, and that means things like watching or listening to scary movies or the news, scary stories, talk shows that could be kind of antagonizing, or high anxiety dramas. And these are things that kids shouldn't be watching anyway, but sometimes they're on in the background and can disturb their ability to go to sleep. One word about blue lights. It can be helpful to avoid blue lights before bedtime, and the reason for that is that these lights from electronic devices have a special short wavelength that can affect your levels of melatonin more so than any other wavelength of light. So the blue light fools our brains into thinking that it's daytime, and it makes us feel more alert when we should actually be feeling sleepy since we're lying in bed. And over time, this can wreak havoc on our body's natural production of melatonin. Some phones, tablets, and computers actually have a built-in blue light filter, so it's a setting that you can turn on, such as a nighttime filter or view, so it's more of a yellow or warm tone that you're looking at. There are also third-party apps that can do this for you. Some people like to use blue light blocking glasses for this purpose, but really the easiest thing is to stop screen use earlier, so about an hour before bedtime, since some of these activities paired with the blue light can make the child more alert or excited and less able to sleep. The AAP has a great media time calculator interactive tool and a customizable plan to help set boundaries and keep these electronic devices out of your bedroom. And you can check that out at healthychildren.org/media use plan. Another way to address some sleep problems is to make sure your child has a sleep-supportive and safe bedroom environment. And this could include things like adding soothing sounds by letting your child listen to relaxing music, sound from nature, or even the sound of silence. You'll want to also keep the level of noise down outside of your children's bedroom, and consider earplugs if you can't control a noisy environment. Someone mentioned a question of whether sound machines are okay to use. If you imagine a baby's time in the womb, the blood vessels around mom's uterus can be really loud, and so you'll see some sound machines that kind of replicate that and sounds like a whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. That's super loud. Usually what I recommend to preserve your baby's hearing is to start at kind of a medium level and then work your way down as your child learns better sleep habits and does not need to have that sound or white noise to fall asleep. So try not to be too loud to begin with and kind of wean it down when possible. Keep the body warm and the room cool. A cooler room temperature can actually help promote sleep and reduce sweating, discomfort, or itching. You can have a non-allergenic blanket close by if the temperature drops too far, and that would be just for children 1 year and up. Warming up with a hot bath prior to falling asleep has also been proven to help people fall asleep better. Some people like soothing scents, such as lavender, to help fall asleep. There have been studies that show that even in noisy intensive care units, scents such as lavender can help people fall asleep better. That said, I do know that some kids are sensitive to irritating scents. So if it seems to be more trouble than it's worth, or it causes trouble with their breathing or creates a cough, then definitely back off on any of these soothing scents. It's really helpful to dim the lights prior to bedtime. And what I tell my parents of newborns is you really want to make the difference between day and night very distinct. So during the daytime, expose your child to daylight, get them outside to play. And someone asked about, is it important to get outside every day to help with sleep? And I do think that helps in the sense that natural daylight can help your body's internal clock. And then keep things dark at night. For newborns, I usually tell parents 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and that sets their body's internal clock and helps the development of good normal levels of melatonin. If you imagine a place like a casino where they keep the lights on all the time, you have no idea what time it is, it's hard for you to get tired and fall asleep because you don't have those external cues helping out with your internal clock. So dim the lights prior to bedtime, and that might mean an hour before the intended time for your child to go to sleep. So speaking of melatonin, and I do get a lot of questions about that. What is melatonin? First of all, it is a natural hormone-like substance. It is produced in an area of the brain called the pineal gland. It's released naturally at night, and it tells the body that it's time to go to sleep. In this country, it's sold as a dietary supplement, which means you can buy it at the pharmacy or health food store or drugstore without a prescription. It can be useful as a short-term way to help kids get some rest while you're trying to work on some of these good bedtime routines that we've talked about. For older children and teens who need to reset their sleep schedule, such as jet lag from vacations or readjusting back to school or other interruptions, sometimes the time change can do this, especially to older children, then a short-term use of melatonin may be helpful. It can come in different forms, such as liquids, gummies, chewables, capsules, and tablets. And I do recommend looking for trusted brands and try to avoid any artificial or other unwanted ingredients. Definitely talk to your pediatrician if you're going to start giving a medicine or interested in trying a medicine such as melatonin. Some of the principles that we follow for children would be to start with the lowest dosage, sometimes like 0.5 milligram or 1 milligram, about 30 to 90 minutes before bedtime. And you'll want to be consistent on what time you give it to your child every night during this period. And read the label carefully to make sure you're following the dosing instructions. You can also watch for any side effects such as morning sleepiness or drowsiness or increased urination at night. And while studies have shown that short-term use of melatonin is relatively safe, less is known about longer use of melatonin, which is why we suggest only using melatonin for short amounts of time. So definitely talk to your pediatrician about melatonin. Somebody did ask a question about ADHD and autism and melatonin. Sometimes that can help with sleep. Some kids with special needs or other challenges may need something that's prescription strength to help with sleep. It's really specific to the child, so that's something that you would want to talk to your pediatrician about specifically. Lastly, I want to remind parents to be a good role model. Children are watching us to see what we do and whether we eat a healthy diet and exercise as well as our own sleep habits. So if staying awake at night, watching TV, or pulling an all-nighter close to it to do work yourself isn't really sending the right message. So do try to make sleep a priority for yourself and show your children that it's a part of living a healthy lifestyle, just like eating right and exercising regularly. So in conclusion, as we talked about earlier, sleep problems are very common, but you don't have to figure it out alone. Talk to your child's pediatrician about your child's sleep habits and problems. They might ask you to keep a sleep log or might have other suggestions on how to improve your child's sleep habits, since they know your child the best other than you as a parent. Be sure to let your pediatrician know, though, if your child has any type of noisy breathing at night, since congestion and obstruction can cause interference can interfere with restful sleep. So things like sleep apnea or allergies or any other type of breathing problems. So that is the end of our presentation right now. I've seen lots of questions that we'll take a look at in a minute. I'm going to thank you all for listening, and please continue to add your questions in the chat box.
Thank you, Dr. Hsu, for all that great information. And as she mentioned, we do have some time now for some questions. I can see a lot of them coming in, so we're going to give Dr. Hsu a second to sort of look through all of these. We will try, Dr. Hsu will try to respond to as many of them, but there are some really great questions here, and I'm not sure we'll be able to get to all of them, but we are certainly going to try. So Dr. Hsu, whenever you are ready.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. As a reminder, a lot of great sleep information can be found on our website, healthychildren.org. And if you have feedback following the presentation with specific questions that we don't answer today or that you don't see on the website, please submit them and we might be able to put them on the website in the future. And I think somebody did ask about the media use plan link again, if we could put that up at some point, maybe towards the end, that would be helpful. There was a question about at what age you can put a pillow in a child's bed. Technically, a bear crib is most important for the first year of life. So anytime after the first birthday, a child could have something with them. In my experience, I've found that most kids don't really care too much about a pillow, or they move around so much that they're not going to stay on top of a pillow until they're in their toddler bed, which is most people that kind of do that around 2 to 3 years of age. So pillows, blankets, etc., after the first birthday would be fine. I also do see in daycare settings that sometimes they will start putting the children on a mat on the floor starting at the first birthday, and that is a great way to transition children out of a crib, and it also can help parents once they decide to take their child out of a crib. One easy way, so let's say your child is at the age that they're climbing out, and maybe that happens at 1.5, maybe that's closer to 3. An easy way to kind of make that transition from a crib to a toddler bed would be to just simply leave the crib assembled, but take the mattress and put it on the floor and start practicing having the child sleep on the mattress that they're already used to, but now it's low to the ground so that they're not in danger of hurting themselves by trying to climb out. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, gosh, lots of great questions here. Sorry, the way I'm scrolling is kind of going back and forth. Handling nightmares. So this is a great question. There are some sleep disturbances such as nightmares or night terrors that can happen as young as children about 8 or 9 months of age and can last for many, many years. Nightmares are scary dreams that the children are aware that they're happening. They wake up, they're often crying, and they can tell you what happened, and they have a memory of it. A night terror, on the other hand, can happen in kids where they seem out of it during the time. It's almost like they're screaming, but it's really hard to calm them down. It's almost like they're looking past you. They may talk or shout and sound like gibberish and not make sense. They seem very confused. So they're two very different things. One way to help with the nightmares is to make sure that your child is not exposed to a lot of scary visuals such as media or listening to scary stories. That can help with that. And getting enough sleep can actually help both types of night problems, sleep problems such as nightmares and night terrors. Night terrors often happen around the same time every evening. So let's say your child goes to bed at 8 o'clock and they have a night terror many nights at around 10 o'clock. You may want to try to wake them up around 9:30 or so, 9 o'clock, just to break that sleep cycle. So both of my kids had night terrors, and I found it helpful to just get them out of bed and have them go to the bathroom and come back about half an hour before each typical night terror happened, and that usually would stop that from happening. You may notice a pattern when your child gets night terrors, such as if they haven't gotten enough sleep because you have been traveling or a sleepover, or they stayed up late for a special circumstance, or they didn't nap well in the daytime, or they were extra active during the day. So just try to think in advance that if your child is overtired, that they might have a night terror that night, and try to preempt that. Let's see what else. My toddler always wants me to lie down with them before they go to sleep, and is used to falling asleep with a parent right next to them. And so the question is, how would you deal with that? So having kids fall asleep with you either in your bed or you in their bed is a very common issue that I see. So the first thing, as we talked about, is to try to avoid getting into that habit in the first place. There are many times during a child's development where they go through periods of either insecurity or separation anxiety. Those ages are from 9 to about 18 months. And then I see that again oftentimes briefly for 2- and 3-year-olds, and then again for 4- and 5-year-olds. So one thing that can be helpful is to not bring them into your room, so have them start out in a place where you want them to stay all night. And if the bed is big enough, you could try to fall asleep next to them, or just help them relax while you're lying next to them. My recommendation, though, is to shorten the amount of time that you stay in there. So I used to tell my son that, okay, I will be here for 1 minute. And at first I would count for a full minute, and then I would leave. And then I would just count for 10 seconds and leave. And don't count out loud, because kids don't have a good sense of time. And so he just figured that when that 10 seconds was up, it was really time. And it trained him to learn how to relax faster. And so I think the goal is to kind of get into that routine where they can feel comfortable, but then also extract yourself gradually. That process should become quicker and quicker as your child gets used to relaxing better on their own. Okay. Let's see what other questions you have. Okay. So what if a baby wakes up from a short nap and you can still tell that they're still tired? How can you get them back to sleep? And this was for a person whose child is 11 weeks old. Whatever routine you use to put them to sleep, whether that is rocking briefly, patting them, and then putting them down, I would do the same thing every time that your child wakes up so that they're used to that routine. So avoid the temptation to feed your baby completely to sleep, or to hold and rock your baby completely to sleep, because what happens is if they're comfortable, then you have them lie down in their crib. That feeling of being alone or cold can wake them up, and then you'll have to start that process all over again. So the best thing to do is get them relaxed enough that you can put them down, and then they put themselves to sleep. So try the same routine over and over. Try not to have them fall asleep in your arms. And think about it. If you fell asleep on the couch and somehow you woke up in your bed, you would get confused as to how that happened. And it can be disturbing that they're confused as why they're not where they thought they were when they wake up. Okay, so just try to be consistent and to have them fall asleep in their own crib. Okay, let me see if I can. Okay, how long should babies sleep with no nighttime feeding? My 5.5-month-old goes to sleep, and I dream feed them once in the middle of the night. So once your baby has a sleep routine, and that can be anywhere from, starting a few months of age to maybe 4 months of age, Many babies do not need to wake up to eat, and that can really differ depending on the baby. So we talked a little bit about how if you have the day and night very separate, babies will learn to sleep at night and be awake during the day. And by following that kind of routine, I have found babies as young as 1 or 2 weeks of age start to have stretches of sleep that are 5, 8, or 12 hours long, and they can sleep all night without needing to breastfeed or take a bottle. There are some babies that even the entire first year, they do wake up for 1 or 2 feedings a night. And the way to tell whether a baby needs to be fed at night is if you try to not feed them and they're frantic and screaming and the only way they'll calm down is to take a full feeding, then they probably are still hungry and need to eat at night. If you try not to feed them and they go to sleep after a period of crying, or you feed them a little bit and they're satisfied and go to sleep, then they probably don't need that full feeding. So it can vary for babies, but most babies will at some point between 4 months and 12 months of age not need to be fed in the middle of the night. So one study showed that 50% of 4-month-old babies will sleep through the night. And through the night was defined by 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So that's a nice 8-hour stretch. They might still wake up early, like 6 a.m., or a little bit earlier than a parent wants them to, but that's considered through the night. And so 50% of babies are doing that, and that's really great. The other 50% are going to take a while, and that could take up to a year or longer. And I think if you know that your baby just has, a small stomach or a fast metabolism and needs to feed, they're going to get the feeding business taken care of quickly at night, then it's okay to continue feeding them at night as long as they're not also trying to play and do other things. And I know we just have a few more minutes left, and looking to see what else. There's a great question about kids who are afraid to go to sleep at age 7 to 10 years old. That is a great question because around that age, it's a very normal stage of development, and I would even say 4 or 5 is also a challenging age. So 4 or 5 years old, I see a lot of kids not be able to tell between fantasy and reality. So something that they see in a cartoon or a video that we know is not realistic could still be scary for them. And around age, so it's really important to avoid scary stories about monsters that can affect sensitive kids and make them not want to fall asleep at night. The 7 to 10-year-old age group has its own challenges because they know what's real and what's not real, and they're starting to get more aware of things like, they worry about people who are getting sick. They might know maybe a grandparent or other family member who has died and are scared of death. I hear that a lot. And so if it's something that is creating anxiety to the point where your child's not able to do things like fall asleep, or they're not eating well, or it makes them scared to go to school, they don't want to be their friends, if it's affecting your child's life, that's a really important time to talk to your pediatrician and possibly get help, maybe from a psychologist or a play therapist, to help with that kind of anxiety. I think we are almost out of time, so I will let our staff close us out. And I really wanted to thank everyone for all the great questions, and sorry we didn't get to all of them today, but remember to check out healthychildren.org for more information.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hsu. This was really great information. We are taking, this will be recorded, so if you didn't get a chance to hear everything, please check back. We are recording all of your questions too and hope to be able to address them on healthychildren.org, so visit us often. You're also invited to register on Healthy Children. You'll get a free monthly newsletter, and we can personalize the homepage that will really deliver content that's specific to your child's age, and you'll hear about some special offers. And please follow us on social media. We are everywhere you are, Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. We have information in English and in Spanish on all of our platforms. And we'd like to have a special thanks to our sponsor, Vicks Piercy's Kids. We appreciate your time today. We really hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and please check back again. We will hold these regularly and appreciate all your time. Take care, everyone.